What's up, everybody? Good afternoon. We are still sitting here waiting for something to happen with one of these final two head coaching openings in the NFL. Still waiting for something concrete, something real, because clearly, if it's not concrete, it's not much. Because we heard from many people over the last couple weeks that Ben Johnson to the Commanders was a done deal. And if it wasn't the Commanders, it was going to be the Seahawks. It was going to be one of those two teams for sure. Ben Johnson is one of the hottest head coaching prospects out there. And now here we are with nobody having got him and him simply just staying put. So clearly we need confirmation before we feel really good about anything. But I do want to talk about some of the things that are being said in the aftermath of Ben Johnson's decision and where the Seahawks are right now. So first, before we move past the Ben Johnson thing, because we need to figure out what we're going to do now, right? We can't spend too much time about the Ben Johnson stuff because we didn't get him, nobody got him, he decided to just stay put. But I do want to ask, why do you think he made this decision? That's kind of important here. We do need to try to figure out why Ben Johnson decided he wanted to stay in Detroit as an offensive coordinator. Um, I got this tweet on screen here from Jeff Simmons where he's talking about it a little bit from his perspective. He basically lays it out and says, "Look, maybe there was just no way you were going to be able to get him realistically. Maybe there was just no way you were going to be able to pull him away from what he has going in Detroit, where he has players that he knows can run his system to an elite level, to where they've been a top five offense for 2 straight years." Pull him away from a situation that was one or two plays away from the Super Bowl just a couple of days ago. So what he basically says is the happy path, which is there wasn't much the Seahawks could do. It's just he doesn't want to be a head coach yet. Maybe he just likes what he has in Detroit so much it was going to take something insane. Maybe he wanted GM control. Maybe he wanted GM power, which would be absurd for somebody that young and inexperienced to want GM power. Maybe that's what he rolled in there asking for, just saying like, look, if you want me that bad, you give me all the power or else I'm just happy where I am. And of course, there's the fact that Detroit still has a little bit more to accomplish before they can really say the job is done. So we got this tweet from Jeff Simmons that kind of lays out what is hopefully the case. But I got to talk a little bit about this as well, this side of things. Adam Schefter, he reported earlier today that Ben Johnson's asking price spooked some teams, most notably probably the Seahawks and Commanders, and that is a different convo. Now, there was a report a couple months ago that said Ben Johnson was looking for about $15 million a year, which that's a lot of money for an unknown quantity at head coach. That would make him one of the highest paid head coaches in the league. He's probably looking for 5 years, kind of like what I think D'Amico actually got even more than that. So maybe Ben Johnson's looking for more than that. I don't know. So I understand that that's a lot of money to be paying a guy when you have no idea if he's going to be good. I understand that is something that any organization should have questions about. But if this was the sticking point for the Seattle Seahawks, where they rolled in there and said, hey, we'll give you 10 million or we'll give you 12 million. And Ben Johnson says, you can have me for 15. And we say, thanks for stopping by. And then we move on. That is different. That is something where I go, wait a minute here. Wait a minute. Are we hard up for cash? Are we hard up for money right now? We've been paying Pete Carroll about that much for the last several years. He's been making about 15 mil a year. And I know this year sucks because we're paying him $15 million to not be our head coach, but after this year, that's done with. That's over. There's no salary cap on coaching hires. So while I understand $15 million a year is a lot for a guy who's completely unproven, that's probably going to be about the going rate for a super hot coordinator prospect, especially one in this kind of cycle. So if you're not willing to meet Ben Johnson's hypothetical asking price, if it was 15, now maybe it was like 30, that I can understand, like, wait a minute, you want to be the highest paid head coach in the NFL by far when you've never done it before, when you have 2 years of coordinator experience? Okay, I can kind of understand going, wait a minute here. But if it was something like 15 or even 16 or 17, that's probably the going rate for guys like this. So if this is what happens, if excuse me, this is what happened, that bugs me. Jody Allen has tens of billions of dollars that she inherited. She did not earn that money in the traditional sense. So if she's gonna like pull out her pockets and try to act like there's nothing in there when there's an opportunity to get a primo head coach and just go, sorry, can't afford it, got to go down to the next tier, the next tier, the next tier, that that doesn't sit so well with me, and we'll never know what actually happened. But I do want to say there is some stuff that could have happened here with Ben Johnson deciding to not go anywhere, and the fact that he decided not to go to the Commanders either is somewhat encouraging. But I hope this wasn't the holdup. Money should not be a big deal when it comes to coaches. It just shouldn't be. I'm sorry, that's how I feel, especially when you have an owner that has this much money. When you have an owner that is this able to farm an advantage over every other coach in the, I'm sorry, every other team in the league. Like, we have money that the Raiders could never dream of spending on a coach. We have money that teams like the, God, what's another, the Steelers could never spend on coaches. Now, Schefter also had this, talking about how Ben Johnson's contract with Detroit has not been adjusted, and he's making way less money as a coordinator than he would have as a head coach, no matter where he got hired and how much he got. He would have gotten plenty more than what he was making. So that does kind of indicate this wasn't really about the money, and maybe Ben Johnson wouldn't have left unless he felt like everything was perfect and we just couldn't meet his expectations. So that's good, I guess. But if there's any sense of, oh, we just weren't willing to pony up the dough, or, oh, he doesn't like our organization, he thinks it's a bad organization that he doesn't want to be a part of, or anything like that, that doesn't bode well. I'm just going to say it. That doesn't bode well. I don't think it's the case, but I do want to discuss the possibility for a little bit. All right, so that's the Ben Johnson stuff shoved to the side now. Now we got to move on. So what do we do now? Obviously, the big gun is Mike Macdonald, and we did interview with him today. We were in Baltimore for a little bit to meet with him. We did leave, and we do not yet have him as our head coach. So I don't know what that means. Obviously, the Commanders are going to kick the tires on him as well, and presumably one of those two teams will come away with him. Now, he's in the same boat as Ben Johnson, right? He's also looking at it like, well, I did a great job in 2023, but the job is not finished. We didn't win the Super Bowl, so maybe he goes back too. I don't know. It's more of a thing than it used to be for coaches and coordinators to be like, I'm going to make a not smart business decision because my emotions are leading me to want to do this thing instead. And in the case of somebody like a Jim Harbaugh, who had the ability to leave and make a ton of money in the NFL in previous years, he stuck around until he won, and eventually he did win. That could be at play here as well with Mike Macdonald. Who knows? And even if he is going to become a head coach, no guarantee it's here. It's probably close to 50-50. I'm not hearing any super strong indications about that. The name that is building steam over the last few hours, though, the guy that is really starting to get a lot of attention here is Mike Kafka. So we've got this report from Dan Graziano of ESPN. Condota is repeating it here. Mike Kafka, legitimate option. We've interviewed with him twice. He has more quotes from Graziano later in this little tweet thread here. A couple different people that Kafka is a guy to watch in Seattle. So there's something going on here with Kafka potentially being the guy. And if Mike Macdonald gets the head coaching job, I think Kafka might still come to Seattle as an assistant head coach / offensive coordinator. So one way or the other, I'm starting to feel like Kafka is going to be here. And if he's the assistant head coach and offensive coordinator, great. That's awesome. Perfect. Amazing. But if he's the head coach, if he's just your head coach, and then you're going out and trying to get somebody like Anthony Weaver to be your defensive coordinator, or Al Harris to be your defensive coordinator. He probably wouldn't come without Dan Quinn, but just as an example, just some guys who could come, Patrick Graham as your defensive coordinator, then people are definitely going to be concerned, because Kafka does not have that blue chip resume. He does not have that blue chip rep. And I want to talk about Kafka for a second here. I've already done my candidate profile with him. This was a few weeks ago. I put this together. I want to be very clear about something. If we get Mike Kafka as our head coach in the next couple days here, honestly, I feel like we're going to have a decision in the next 30 hours or so. I'm not going to say anything bad about Kafka. I like Kafka. I'm not saying anything negative about Kafka as a coach, and I think that he is on track to be a head coach sometime in the next few years. I just don't know if it should be happening right now, coming off a year where he was the coordinator for such a bad offense, and he has yet to coordinate an offense that is even above average. Now, I can sit here and say, look, he did a great job in 2022. He did. 15th in the league with Daniel Jones as your quarterback, no receivers, a bad offensive line. Yeah, that's great. The only blue chipper on that offense in 2022 was Andrew Thomas and sometimes Saquon Barkley, but I don't even like Barkley that much. So that 2022 Giants offense being as good as it was a miracle, and Kafka deserves a ton of credit for that. He deserves credit for what he did with Patrick Mahomes while he was with the Kansas City Chiefs. Not taking anything away from him there. So I want to be very clear about this. If the Seahawks come out of this process with head coach Mike Kafka, I got nothing bad to say about him. I like him way more than I would like a guy like a Patrick Graham or an Aaron Glenn or anybody like that. It's going to be one of those things where I need to see it to believe it. If we get Mike Macdonald, or had we gotten Ben Johnson, or had we gotten Jim Harbaugh, or even Frank Smith, who I still like a lot. I know people are off of him right now. Those guys, I wouldn't have needed to see it to believe it. I would have gotten hyped on my own. I would have just been like, okay. I look at the resume, I look at the results, and I go, yeah, this guy totally deserves to be a head coach right now. This guy has done great things in recent years, and it's time. And he's ready to go, and I feel like we're going to be great with this guy. Kafka, guys like this, guys like Aviro, guys like, especially Patrick Graham. Patrick Graham I would actually be pretty down on. Guys like, yeah, I'll throw Dan Quinn in there as well, because I'm not as down on Dan Quinn as some of you guys are. I need to see it to believe it, right? I'm not going to just look at that and go, okay, I'm hyped. We're going to have a great season this year. No, I'm going to look at it and go, I don't know what to expect. I'm not going to drink the Kool-Aid until I see some wins. I see the team actually performing well. And I'm not ruling that out at all. I want to be clear here. If this ends up being the hire, I'm not killing it. I don't hate it. I don't even really dislike it. It'll just be weird to me that we weren't able to land one of the top guys and had to settle for a guy down the pecking order. That's going to throw me off, because theoretically we should have all the money we need to spend on coaches. We should have a roster that is desirable by a lot of coaches out there, especially on the offensive side of the ball with these receivers and these running backs. So the fact that we had to settle is going to make me wonder what's going on here. Do people not want to play for this or coach for this organization? Is it a Jody Allen thing where people don't want to play under her because they think she's a bad owner? Do they not like our facilities? Do they not like living in Seattle? Is it? It's going to be something that is hard to fix, right? You can't fix having an owner that coaches don't want to play for unless you get a new owner, and that might not happen for a while at this point. Jody seems kind of invested. So that's kind of where I am right now. I'm not talking down about Kafka. Really, I'm just talking up some of these other guys. I'm talking up guys like Frank Smith, guys like Ben Johnson, guys like Mike Macdonald. If we can't come away with one of those guys, even a Vrabel who has proven NFL success, and we end up with somebody like Kafka who's coming off a terrible year, even though I don't think that year was his fault at all, and is a guy who's always been in the shadow of a really good offensive head coach in Andy Reid and Brian Daboll, then it's going to make me wonder if maybe this just this situation is not something that these coaches want to get involved in. I don't know. All right, I'll see you guys later. Go Hawks. Be on stream later today. Let me know what you think. And that is the latest.